Good morning, everybody. Hope you are enjoying the rainy Friday that we're having today. Supposed to be warm, but getting lots of rain. Today, I want to go over with you the answers to the Mesopotamia RDR notes and the Ancient Egypt RDR notes. I'm also going to post these today in your assignment so that you can check your responses. You guys are doing a great job with your notes. Two things I want to comment on. One, when you are looking at technology, list at least three. Remember, we talk about that in class. If you're creating a list, do three or more and think about the inventions that they had during that time. Also, for social structure, if you can, divide them up into upper, middle, lower classes, and what groups of people would you find? So Mesopotamia was a review. Let's take a look over here at what we found for these 7 characteristics for Mesopotamia. I think we all remember that Mesopotamia is located between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Remember that they were led by a king, but we said their type of government that they had was really entwined. We saw a monarchy, we saw a theocracy, we saw a dictatorship. Because if you recall, the gods were seen as the top authority, and the kings did whatever the gods told them to. Writing, do you remember the cuneiform? We practiced that in class. They came up with the clay tablets and the stylus to write on. For their stable food supply, they're the ones who came up with the irrigation systems. They figured out how to get that water to the land. Remember how basic and simple they were when they first started? They dug ditches in the ground, allowing water to travel. Those 4 parts to the irrigation system, the levees, the canals, the dams, and the reservoirs. For their religion, they were absolutely polytheistic. The ziggurat was the central hub of their religion. That's where the gods lived at the top. Remember, nobody was allowed in there except kings and priests, possibly in the bottom, to bring the gods some gifts. For their social structure, you had the kings, priests, and landowners, government officials in the upper class. You had the craftspeople and farmers, artisans in the middle class, and the slaves made up the biggest class, which was the lower class. Technology. Do you remember how many inventions that they had? So many things we learned from Mesopotamians. The irrigation systems, those of you who love math, remember they came up with math. The calendar, ziggurat, the wheel was huge. They used the wheel for chariots. They also used the wheel for plows and to create pottery. So those are just a few bits of information on the 7 characteristics of Mesopotamia. Make sure you check your responses to these responses. You are going to need these next week when we do an activity where we put all of this information together. Okay, moving on, let's take a look at Ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt is a new civilization to you. I'm sure you have heard of it before. It is located along the Nile River. Most of us, when we think of ancient Egypt, we think of pyramids, and you are correct that ancient Egyptians were the first to create these massive structures, the pyramids, and they were used as tombs for their pharaohs, and their pharaohs were the kings. They were also seen as gods. So again, we have a mixed batch of governments here. We have a monarchy, we have a dictatorship, we also have a theocracy. Their writing system was hieroglyphics. Next week sometime we're going to be doing an activity with hieroglyphics, so you'll get to experience those a little bit. They also came up with the first paper. It was called the papyrus paper. There was a plant that grew along the Nile River. It was called the papyrus plant, and they were able to use the reeds of this plant to create paper. Some of the crops that they grew, wheat was huge. They started to make bread during this time, and porridge, barley and lettuce. Religion, they were also a polytheistic religion. The pharaohs were seen as the gods, and if you think of mummies, thinking back to Halloween or trick-or-treating, if you saw anybody dress up like a mummy, mummies came from ancient Egypt. Next week as well, you're going to be doing a little activity with the mummification process, but that is where the pharaohs were turned into mummies, and the thought was that they needed their body and all of their belongings for their afterlife. And so the pyramids were created, and in the bottom of the pyramids were the tombs. The mummies would be put in the bottom of these pyramids with all of their most precious belongings in the hopes that they would have them all in their afterlife. Their social structure, there's many tiers, and I think as you did your research, you probably saw the different tiers to the social structure. The pharaoh is always at the top. He's also seen as a god. Government officials, priests, scribes, artisans, peasants, farmers, and slaves at the bottom. You're going to see throughout our ancient civilizations that many of the social structure pyramids are very similar, having your most powerful at the top and your least powerful at the bottom. So some technology, those of you who just absolutely love brushing your teeth, you can thank the ancient Egyptians for this because they are the ones who came up with toothpaste. Now, we've talked a lot about the census in class, and we talked about how it looks at how many people live in an area, the population. We also talked about how it looks at a lot more than just population, and that this year is a census year. I told you I would let you know. We finally got our letter for the U.S. Census, and it took us to a website where we had to fill some information in. So ask your parents if they got their census information. But this came about during ancient Egypt. Mummification and the embalming process is something else. Again, we're going to talk more about that next week. Medicine. They got lots of medicines along the Nile River from the plants that grew there. So this was a huge technological development. Those of you who love math again, geometry came from them. Black ink. Remember, our Mesopotamians were using styluses to carve into clay tablets. Well, here in ancient Egypt, they came up with paper, and they also came up with black ink. The calendar, iron tools, so many inventions came from ancient Egypt that we still use today. So those are a little overview of our notes on Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. On Monday, maybe Tuesday, I will go over our notes over the Indus River and what you're going to do today. Today you're going to be exploring our last ancient civilization, which is along the Huanghe or Yellow River, and you're going to be studying the Shang dynasty. Now you're going to come to find out there are many dynasties that are found in and around the Huanghe River. The one that I want you to focus on is the Shang dynasty. When you're looking at your RDR activity. Now, I have lots of questions that said, hey, the RDR activity is the same. You're correct. You are looking at the 7 characteristics for each ancient civilization. So yes, you're looking at those same characteristics. The only difference is you're going to find out lots of different information about each ancient civilization. Remember the RDR the PDF packet that has been attached to the bottom of each of your Google Classroom entries. That is also a great resource. So if you're having trouble finding stuff online, make sure you look at that packet, go through it, read it. Just know you do not need to complete that packet if you are doing the online Google Classrooms. Today is Friday. I sent an email out earlier in the week saying if we haven't seen any activity from you, you're going to be receiving an email or a phone call from us. Make sure you're trying to pay careful attention to the due dates. I know this is all brand new and we're all trying to just get a grip on how we're going to organize our week. But make sure you're starting to submit stuff for every class so that we know that you understand what's going on in your classes. And if you have any questions, make sure you're emailing. Or if you're in Google Classroom, a private comment is quick. I typically have Google Classroom up most of the day. Looking at it if I'm not looking at my email, so I'll get those private comments pretty quickly. Your homework for the weekend is to have fun. Go outside, enjoy the nice weather. It is supposed to be a little bit chillier tomorrow, but I saw next week it's going to get warmer. And your activity from today for the Shang Dynasty is not going to be due until Monday at 8 o'clock. All right, wishing you guys all a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon.